Okay, it's 7 o'clock. I'd like to call a meeting to order. Please rise for the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, roll call. Just make a note. Everybody is present. And we'll start with the public hearing. I need a motion to open the public hearing for approving the CID request at 555 North Main Street.
So move.
Second. I have a motion and a second. Call roll.
Mr. Major,
Yes.
Mr. Garvey,
Yes.
Mr. Bueller.
Yes.
Mr. Clemens,
Yes.
Mr. Brungard,
Yes.
Mr. Stednica,
Yes.
Mr. Trinkle, Mr. Kirby.
Yes.
Motion passed. Public hearing on the advisability of modifying the Community Improvement District in the city of Lansing, Kansas, known as 555 North Main Community Improvement District, and regarding the city's intent to levy a Community Improvement District sales tax within such district. The owner of Main Street Dodge Jeep Inc., Doug Kenneth, has asked to increase the footprint of the Community Improvement District for Main Street CDJR. The overall project budget from the original $4,312,000 to $7 million, and intends to keep the existing 1% sales tax imposed by the CID the same. The CID can be increased in size and have the budget amended so long as there is a public hearing held and a petition filed by the owner. Is there any discussion on this topic? Council, anything? Okay, then I need a motion to close the public hearing for approving the CID request at 555 North Main Street.
So move. Second.
Have a motion and a second. Call the roll.
Mr. Major,
Yes.
Mr. Garvey,
Yes.
Mr. Bueller.
Yes.
Mr. Clemens,
Yes.
Mr. Brungard,
Yes.
Mr. Stednica,
Yes.
Mr. Trinkle,
Yes.
Mr. Kirby.
Yes.
Motion passed. Old business approval of minutes. The regular meeting minutes of April 7th, 2022 are attached. I need a motion to approve the regular meeting minutes of April 7th, 2022 as presented.
So move. Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? I'll call the roll.
Mr. Major,
Yes.
Mr. Garvey.
Yes.
Mr. Bueller.
Yes.
Mr. Clemens.
Yes.
Mr. Brungard,
Yes.
Mr. Stednica,
Yes.
Mr. Trinkle,
Yes.
Mr. Kirby.
Yes.
Motion passed. Audience participation. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to address the council on an item that is not on the agenda? Sir, please come forward and state your name and address.
Clint Easton, 24120 147th Street.
Okay.
I would like to add onto my driveway, and I live in a rural part of the city. The city limits across the street is actually outside of the city limits. And I'm wanting to add onto my driveway to try to add some landscaping and put a place to park trailers because I own a business which is registered in the city. And I want to make everything look nice, but I'm right there. I want to add something in the back behind those trees on the bottom side where it says 410 feet. And I already have a 245-foot long gravel driveway, and all I want to add is a spot off to the side that's gravel, and I'm going to add a retaining wall and landscaping to try to make everything look nice. And I've talked to my neighbors. Everybody is okay with it. And the reason for wanting to do non-paved surface is the cost. It's 80 cents per square foot for me to put gravel in. It's $6 per square foot for asphalt and 10 for concrete, and I can't afford it.
Right. And
This has already been extremely hard couple of years for us, small businesses.
yeah, so before we talk on the council about it any further, I have talked to staff about this issue. This is one that came in the uniform code, the ODO ordinance code. And as we go along working within this code, we found several issues that we might want to consider changing. This being one of them. It's behind his house, and the code requires that they would have to concrete it. I'm like, well, his driveway all the way up to that point is gravel. Why would you then have to concrete behind that? So, I mean, some of it doesn't make sense, but amongst the governing body, I think at a work session, we could probably come up with a change to the ODO, and that's what I'm recommending, that we push it to a work session. So we're not kind of enforcing that kind of thing. Matt, did you want to make any comments on that?
Sure. This is a regulation that was on the books before the UDO. The UDO strengthened that and basically put it in writing that there can't be any additional gravel added anywhere in the city. It's not a staff level decision. It's a decision for this body. So I know Clint and I've talked about it several times, and every time I've told him that it's not something that I can approve.
Right.
So,
But I think it's something we need to look at a little deeper and make the appropriate changes to the UDO.
Ask a question.
Sure.
Mr. Easton, so where you said it's just above the 0 and the 410 behind that set of trees there?
So what I want to do is I have pull my tractor. I want to make a straight off deal right here so I can back in my driveway, park here with another spot right here, which would require me to put a retaining wall. I would have to do it. So I want to add something down here. You can't see past right here from the road. My house.
There's a hump there, isn't there? Yeah.
Thank you.
And yeah, and your closest, the closest house to you is how far away? It's pretty far, isn't it? Distance wise, I mean.
Yeah, it's not. And everybody around me is fine with it. I have no problems. I would have no problems getting signatures from everybody too. Like I said, across the street is even the county. There's grain bins and what used to be a farm across the street, and the people directly in front of me have horses. I mean, it's an agricultural area.
Yeah.
So,
Any other questions?
thank you.
So I do have a question. Just procedurally, do we have to go in there and change the ODO, or we want to discuss at the working, what are some of the solutions?
Yeah, no, I think the recommendation is that we look at that section of the ODO and make a determination on what we want to say in there. I mean, right now it says only hard surface, but like I said, there's situations where that really shouldn't apply at all.
I
Yeah.
agree. I was just asking
Yeah.
what the procedure was.
Yeah, the procedure was to table it and then move it to, I mean, it was an open conversation, so it wasn't on the agenda.
Right.
Okay. New business ordinance number 1081. The attached ordinance would approve the expansion of the CID, the increase to the project budget, and authorize the mayor and the city clerk to execute the attached amendment to the development agreement. This ordinance is the second step in the process to amend and increase the size of the existing CID, as well as increase the overall budget of the CID. An action, I need a motion to approve ordinance number 1081, an ordinance of the city of Lansing, Kansas, authorizing the creation and modification of the 555 North Main Street Community Improvement District in the city of Lansing, Kansas.
So moved. Second.
Not yet done, but thank you. Authorizing the making of certain project improvements related hereunto, approving the estimated cost of such project improvements, levying a community improvement district sales tax with such district, and providing for the method of financing the same.
So
So
moved.
moved.
Sorry. I have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Better that time, didn't we?
No discussion, call the roll.
Mr. Major,
Yes.
Mr. Garvey,
Yes.
Mr. Bueller.
Yes.
Mr. Clemens,
Yes.
Mr. Brungard,
Yes.
Mr. Stednica,
Yes.
Mr. Trinkle,
Yeah.
Mr. Kirby.
Yes.
I take it this is the third step. Item 4 is the First Amendment to the Development Agreement to 555 North Main Street CID. Property owner wishes to extend the size of the existing CID. This is the First Amendment to the CID agreement. I need a motion to approve the First Amendment to Development Agreement to 555 North Main Street Community Improvement District.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion on this one? No discussion, call the roll.
Mr. Major,
Yes.
Mr. Garvey,
Yes.
Mr. Bueller.
Yes.
Mr. Clemens,
Yes.
Mr. Brungard,
Yes.
Mr. Stednica,
Yes.
Mr. Trinkle,
So I just want to understand, the first one is to open the meeting.
Second one is to hear the meeting.
Second one is
Close the
to
meeting.
approve the ordinance.
And then, well, that's 1 and 2. And then 3 is
Approve the amendment.
there's a lot of 555s in there. I was just trying to understand what all the 555s.
There's
It's
this,
just an address.
we had a public hearing, we opened the public hearing. There was no discussion, we closed the public hearing. That takes care of that. And we just approved the 1081 ordinance. Now we're doing the final step, First Amendment to that ordinance, so that you can proceed.
Yes, okay.
Good day. Okay.
Mr. Kirby?
Yes.
Motion passed. Item number 5 is the Lansing Historical Society and Museum Board request. And I'll read some background. We received correspondence from Deborah Bates Lamborn requesting this topic be on the agenda tonight. Ms. Lamborn is the chairperson of the Lansing Historical Society. Ms. Lamborn is requesting funds that were transferred to the city of Lansing from the dissolution of the Kansas Regional Prison Museum, 501c3, during March 19, be transferred instead to the Lansing Historical Society and Museum. Upon receiving similar correspondence from the Historical Society, in late 21, the city replied with a copy of the KRPM bylaws and inquired as to what superseded those bylaws. So the Kansas Regional Prison Museum Board was a separate entity from the Lansing Historical Society. The city of Lansing raised funds for the KRPM and for several years deposited all revenues from Lansing Days and other events into the KRPM fund. Leonard Lockwood was the city's point of contact to the KRPM board. In accordance with the KRPM bylaws, specifically Article 10, which states upon dissolution of the KRPM that the assets remaining would be transferred first to the city of Lansing, and if not accepted, would then be transferred to the Lansing Historical Society. The city of Lansing accepted the funds, and the council directed staff to utilize those funds for a cultural, recreational purpose and for something permanent. Based on this direction from the council, in the March 21, 2019, the funds were deposited into the Special Parks and Rec Fund for design construction of Kenneth Bernard Park. The design, engineering, and inspection of Kenneth Bernard Park totals $566,671.75 and was approved by the council in May of 21. Construction of Bernard Park is slated to begin any day now. You have in your packets the request in a letter dated January 22 from the Lansing Historical Society and Museum. And I believe Ms. Deborah Bates Lamborn is in the audience tonight and would like to further address the council on the Historical Society's request.
Good evening. I am Deborah Bates Lamborn. I'm the president of the Lansing Historical Society. I was curious because in the packet, the letter that we wrote to Tim Vandal on October 28th of 2021 was not included in that packet. And I thought that was rather important information for you all to hear. Were you referencing this letter here?
I was not. I was
Okay.
referencing
And-
your request.
Right. And then we also received from the attorney a response to that letter 6 weeks later. I can take the time to read this letter if you'd like to hear it, or I can move on.
This is the one dated January 2026?
No, sir, this is dated October 28th, 2021. We got a lot of dates floating around here. Okay.
Yeah.
It'll take me 2 seconds.
Sure.
Okay. It has recently come to our attention that money raised during a 10-year period by the Lansing Historical Society, note, I say Lansing Historical Society, a nonprofit entity, was given to the city of Lansing by way of the Kansas Regional Prison Museum and donations to the Lansing Historical Museum while it was owned and managed by the city of Lansing. This money is now a line item in the city's budget and is earmarked for the Kansas Regional Prison Museum, which was a nonprofit entity that dissolved 2 years ago. Leonard Lockwood, acting as an officer of the Kansas Regional Prison Museum, who, by the way, was the treasurer for both of these entities, had no right to relinquish all funds to the city of Lansing once the Kansas Regional Prison Museum was dissolved. By all rights, the money should have been returned to the Lansing Historical Society that spent a decade raising this money for the two entities, one a nonprofit and the other a city government in the state of Kansas. We have documentation to support our claims. Our greatest fear is the general public will find out that the memorials they gave for their deceased loved ones was used to benefit the coffers of the city of Lansing. Everything our membership did to raise money now sits as a line item in the city of Lansing's budget. Recently, we had to replace the Lansing Historical Society laptop that was once used by Mary Lou Allen, secretary for the Lansing Historical Society, sister to the president, Linda Lockwood, and sister-in-law to Leonard. The laptop was supposedly wiped clean of all information with the exception of the membership list. When PCK transferred the information onto the new laptop, there was a lot more than just what we expected to see in the membership. There were letters, templates to different businesses throughout this community, Hallmark cards, Holiday Inn, and each one of those letters specifically stated it was the Lansing Historical Society raising this money to make our museum a better museum. Make your checks payable to the Lansing Historical Society using our 501c3. Now, the Regional Prison Museum had their own, by the way, the Lansing Historical Society paid for that renewal every year. They didn't even pay for their own nonprofit status. We're here tonight on behalf of the Lansing Historical Society Museum. We are a nonprofit museum whose mission is to preserve the history of Delaware Township, the city of Lansing, Kansas State Penitentiary at Lansing, and the United States Penitentiary at Leavenworth. Boy, that kind of sounds like a regional prison museum to me. We're requesting you relinquish and release the museum's funds in excess of $140,000 that were raised and donated with the promise of a better museum. Our museum has been located at 115 East Kansas Avenue on the front lawn of the state prison property for 30 years next week. The Lansing Historical Society raised the money to be used for a proposed Kansas Regional Prison Museum, which would have been an expansion of our museum. As you can see with the display here that was circulated throughout the community, there was only one way into that Kansas Regional Prison Museum, and that was through our front door and back out our front door. There was not a separate museum here. They were one museum combined. An attempt was made to secure the gallows for a permanent exhibit, which you can see inside there, as part of the existing prison artifact collection of the Lansing Historical Society Museum. In a news article from 2004, a former museum director of the Kansas State Historical Society made it clear that it was unlikely that was ever going to happen. Yet 3 years later, the Kansas Regional Prison Museum was formed after being told you will not get those gallows. We're here tonight to represent the people of our community and members who donated in good faith to our museum with the promise of making it a better museum. The city is holding $140,000 that we raised for a museum. We are that museum. We request that the money be returned to the Lansing Historical Society and museums so that we may continue our mission. What I have here, gentlemen, and this is very important, this is the Articles of Incorporation for the Kansas Regional Prison Museum. The officers, the governing body, Harley Russell, Kenny Wilk, who was a state representative at the time, found out on Tuesday he was a charter member. He used the F word, fraud. His name was put on this form in order to induce contributions to the Kansas Regional Prison Museum. Also on here, Jerry Riley knew nothing about this. How can you have a governing board and they don't know they're on it? Then we have David Mchugh. David was on there the longest. He was on there until 2018. And what I have here is a registered letter in which Dave Mchugh wrote to the Secretary of State saying he had no knowledge of being on that board. And so was the same from Kenny Wilk and Jerry Riley. These names were put on there random. So how can you even lend any credence to this thing here that has, their bylaws? Who wrote them? Who wrote those bylaws? Because obviously the governing board that didn't know they were on it, they didn't write it. So to me, it all began with this. That's your first mistake. The board was a fraud. Then we have this, because I know it's been rumored that this was money raised from Lansing days. This was written by a city employee for Lansing. And they are requesting money be donated. And I'm not talking $20. I'm not talking $50. I'm talking $1,500 a pop from different people in the community. And it's listed once again, payable to the Lansing Historical Society. How can you use our name and then say, oh, that's our money? Well, it's not. And it all began when they started this whole incorporation and they put people's names on there that did not even know they were part of that committee. They were not part of the governing board. And last but not least, on the bylaws here, because on the dissolution of it, and I'm glad that we all know what that is, it says here, they refer to it as assets. They weren't talking about money. They were talking about the items that were inside the museum. They were talking about that museum. Once it was built, if it was dissolved, who would get that? So they were talking about the city of Lansing getting it, but they also talk about the State Historical Society getting it. It says it right here on the bylaws. The State Historical Society was a third option. But you know what? We're going after the fourth option. Because the fourth option says, if you don't like this, take it to district court. And that's where we'll be headed. This was our last recourse here to come before you in a nice, polite way, state the facts, tell you what we know, and then go from there. Thank you, gentlemen. Do you have any questions?
Anybody have any questions?
Well, you brought stuff here tonight I haven't seen or heard. These people that are named on this committee who are now claiming, I don't.
It's all in the Secretary of State's office.
I don't have it.
It's all filed under the
Okay.
Kansas Regional Prison Museum.
I'm not questioning
There's
it.
a website.
Who came up with the people, Jerry Riley, Kenny Will?
Well, that would have been. Thank you. The former mayor. There you go.
He came up with those names.
Those names. And those gentlemen know nothing about being on that board. And let me tell you what, it was 2018 when David Mchugh found out, because I called him and asked him when he found out, and he immediately called the Secretary of State's office and wrote a letter.
He was long gone.
He was long gone by 2018, but we were still there, the Kansas Regional Prison Museum with that board. So I don't know how you could have a board decide to give away money that was raised by the Lansing Historical Society. I don't know how you could have done it. I don't know how they could have done it. I don't know how you could have accepted it, knowing the circumstances of just having 3 board members. That doesn't make a quorum.
That's all that was available.
Well, but if you didn't have a board, you should have dissolved a lot. I mean, before, but you had these members on there that really weren't on it. They didn't know they were on it. You know, it's not our responsibility to make sure you got a board, but it is our responsibility to make sure that your decisions you make, you have to have a quorum. And the bylaws state you had to have 9 members of that governing
our
board.
board, though.
Well,
Yeah,
that
that's
was
not our
that was-
board.
I know it's not your board, but it's all part of the city of Lansing. On
No,
and
it's not.
on here, it says right here on the bylaws, city of Lansing, city of Lansing, city of Lansing. I'm sorry, you're about as connected to this as you could possibly be. And when Gene Kirby, gave that money to the city of Lansing,
I didn't give the money to the city. of
who was on the board at the
Lansing. I
time
was never on the board.
of the Kansas Regional Prison Museum?
Never.
Well, this document says you are. This document says you gave the money to the city.
I'd like to see that document.
You
that
bet.
gave the money. to
Kansas-
the city,
hey,
because
I tell you-
was never on any board in any way connected with the historical.
I think the
society.
document you're referring to says he's a witness. I don't think it says board member. I think it says witness.
A witness, so that means there were only two people that voted on that.
It says Mr. Lockwood, Mr. Young, and Mayor Smith.
Yeah.
Deborah, where did you get this information?
Which part?
The majority of it? You said something about the Secretary.
We have, that Secretary of State's website under businesses. I mean, you could look it up and you can see the Lansing Historical Society there. But if you want to find the Kansas Regional Prison Museum, you have to actually enter Leonard Lockwood's name in order to find the information. And all the reports that were ever filed from the beginning until the end are on there, and everyone that was on there is listed. Yeah. So think about it, gentlemen.
Mayor, I just think we need some time to
Of course.
digest all this, gather some information.
Yeah, we're not making.
There's a lot of things that are confusing
Right.
and misunderstood. I mean, you said for 10 years, they collected money for the Historical Society, not for the prison museum, right? But they put it all in one kitty, right? Well, why didn't someone notice that and separate it?
Because
Within 10 years.
Because it was in a private institution and it was called the Federal Credit Union under United States Penitentiary. We did not have access to that. We did not even have access to the actual account number.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
you're willing to sue us to get access to the money.
Well,
Why wasn't you willing to sue them to get access to it?
exactly,
I don't understand
exactly.
that.
The regional prison museum account.
Yeah,
Right.
that's,
Not the
yeah.
historical-
Right.
no,
Right.
It was
So
a
why didn't the
separate
Historical
account.
Society go out after them and say, hey, part of that money in that account is ours. Why is it in your account? Why don't we separate and have two separate accounts?
we
You should have two accounts.
we did
Yeah,
we did not have knowledge of what was in that account. You know,
I don't know.
I gotta say, the accounting boxes mysteriously showed up one day
Yeah.
in the
I
museum.
don't understand how they were able to deposit funds, though, that weren't written out to them in checks. Like if there's a check written out to the Historical Society, how was the Regional Prisons Museum Fund able to deposit that? I mean, shouldn't that be something the credit union would have
Because
been able to
they
make?
were all part of the same account at the credit union. They were all part of that. There were 5, maybe 6 accounts at least that we know of, but we were not able to see what was being deposited into the Kansas Regional Prison Museum. We only saw what was being deposited into the Lansing Historical Society. But he was taking those checks and running them through. So we
Who
have no
was? What-
idea.
who-
Leonard
who
Lockwood
was?
was. Leonard Lockwood was the treasurer for both. He was the treasurer for the Historical Society and the Kansas Regional Prison Museum. And if that isn't a conflict, I don't know what is, but I'm not going there with it. But yeah.
Sounds like there's more issues than just.
Oh, there are. There really are,
Yeah.
Mayor.
The letters you spoke about on the computer that you found.
Yes,
Can you send those to Tim and Tim send them to us so we can read them for ourselves?
certainly,
Yeah,
certainly. Yes.
As much.
Yeah, I've never seen those documents,
Yes.
so please feel free to send them to us.
Yes. Oh, definitely. Yes.
I
Yeah,
would
because
like to know if there's any accounting that's available.
any what?
Any accounting. I mean, I know that the city itself, though,
Yeah.
did
Yeah. Oh,
donate
yeah. Yeah. We've
or help raise funds for the prison museum, right?
Mhm. Right.
So what portion of what they had in their assets was actually that? And what portion are you claiming was specifically for the Historical Society?
Well, we're claiming that the money that was raised, that they used the Lansing Historical Society's name. Okay. And when you're told to make checks payable to the Lansing Historical Society using our 501c3, not the Kansas Regional Prison Museum's 501c3, ours, the Lansing Historical Society. And that's how they did it time and time again. And back to this thing that was
But it
written
was
by,
never deposited into any of your accounts, is what you're saying.
We have no knowledge of that without subpoena
No, that's not
whatever.
accurate. You can go to your bank. and
No,
see-
no,
get-
it's a federal credit union. It's private. They won't let us have access to that
So your
information.
entity, which is I
No.
guess, duly organized entity that has a bank account there, you have no access to?
We had no access to
Okay,
that
all right.
information there. Once, when Leonard finally resigned and we had our new treasurer come in, he gave us one check, and there were 6 different accounts. But we weren't able to go back and see what was going on with those accounts. We just got one check. Now, gentlemen,
Well, how much was that check
Kevin,
for?
can you explain to me?
Yeah.
Why they're not letting you have access to those accounts?
with,
Because I don't
Yeah.
understand.
well,
I'm ignorant on this.
Yeah.
On the issue. I don't understand why you guys.
because it's a private credit union.
But you're a member.
No, not of that. I'm not a member of that. When we received the money from Leonard, we moved it from Country Club, we moved it into Country Club Bank, and now it's a mutual savings. He didn't have that available to us, what accounts were there in numbers that were at the USB Credit Union. We did not have access to that information. So we have no idea how much was raised, how much was moved. But we do
So
know,
you did say when it dissolved and everything, you
Yeah.
did get a check.
yes, we did.
And what was
I
that?
believe it was $31,000.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, right now, what we struggle with is what was really given to who in
Right.
support of what.
Right,
I
right.
mean, your claim personally, I think is a tad bit outrageous, saying you want the whole amount. Basically
Right.
saying that the city didn't give anything to the prison museum,
Yeah.
which I don't know either way, to be honest with you. But
Right.
if there is a way we can figure out what that funding is,
Yes.
then I think we would get somewhere.
Well,
Mayor, wouldn't it
if,
seem to you that sorry,
go ahead.
it would seem to me like there's got to be some sort of paper trail.
That's what I'm saying.
Well, Mr.
On the accounting
Brungart-
side, there
And
has to
there's
be
some
something.
Well,
documentation.
I agree with Mr. Brungart, but the thing is there's documentation every year with how much was given to the city of Lansing, okay? Well, actually, they called it the Lansing Museum, and how much was given to the Kansas Regional Prison Museum. But we can't trust those figures. They were all handwritten. The rest of it's all typed and on a computer, and these all look like they were all written on the same day, same pen.
You don't have statements.
We have amounts that were written down by Leonard, okay, of deposits that were, or money that was given to the city. And it amounts to, what did we say, like $40,000?
But I'm talking about statements from the credit union. You don't have
No,
anything like that.
nothing. And we don't even have that for our own historical society. It's one of those, forensic accounting things that could really go on because we have all the documentation. We have all the paperwork. We just don't have the bank information.
Can we not request that? I mean, they transferred the funds to us, right, from a bank.
Well, I find it, I just incredulous that a federally insured banking institution who has accounts in its umbrella of all their accounts has an account with tax ID numbers on it, the tax status of these entities, that the entity that still survives today says it has zero access to that data. It just does rings impossible to me.
Well, that would depend on how the account was actually listed. And
still would have
whether
a
or not
tax
there would be
ID
a
number.
tax ID.
Tax ID
Yeah.
number.
I mean, like I said, I think that's kind of OB right now. I mean, if we don't have the data, we don't have the data. What we do know is you were given X amount, and then the rest of the assets were given to us.
Mhm.
Mayor, and there's also another avenue that hasn't even been discussed yet, but I did catch it when Ms. Lamborn Fate said this, was that the fact is that the city controlled the city or the museum for X number of years.
Right.
So if it was written out during a period of time that the city was staffing it, paying for all the equipment, paying for that, is there any kind of give back to the city for all the money it spent to run this organization, fund that organization, send out the letters? I mean, I'm not hearing any give and take here
Mhm.
from the museum in reference to what is the actual fair share. I'm just not hearing that because again, when you look at the bylaws say assets. Cash is a tangible asset of an organization. Therefore, it's just not, it's interpretation. If she wants to believe it meant because somebody donated an item, fine, that's her interpretation. But if you want to get down to brass tacks, an asset is an asset, and if it dissolved, it is what it is. It didn't say anything in there about giving it back to levels unless the city of Lansing rejected it. The city did not reject it. The city accepted it. And that's what the bylaws of the organization was. Now, if the museum wants to come in here and say, we believe it'd be fair to get X back, then I think it'd be fair for the museum to produce the documents. I wrote down, it says, Ms. Bates Lamborn had indicated that, we have documents. Okay, what documents? Please provide them. We'll take a look at them, prove them up. I mean, you're asking for a significant amount of money. If you want to say that every donation was due to the Lansing Historical Museum under the tax ID of that organization, then show the documents. And this board can then review them and see if that's what they want to do or not.
They're in boxes. They're in boxes this long, this tight, and there's 2 of them. Now, do you want it? Who wants to go through them all?
Well, I mean,
It's quite a headache. It really is. I mean, there's
you're not a lawyer or anything, but to
I'm not
me,
either.
the burden of proof is on the historical
Well,
society.
there you go.
So,
There you go.
I mean,
right.
currently, right? I mean, so
Right.
if you have some proof in a box,
Oh, yeah.
in documents,
Mhm.
whatever, I mean, I'm sure we could have some kind of working session or whatever and go over that.
Yeah.
To get to the bottom of
Mhm.
I
But the
agree, Mayor. I
disparity.
mean, it's a matter of, we need to collect
Yeah.
as much information as we possibly can. We want to make an informed decision.
Mhm.
Well,
Tim, did you have something?
Well,
Well, a couple of things. Yeah, we're dropping someone's name around here quite a bit, and I think maybe it would be worth it for the governing body to at least hear Mr. Lockwood's side of the story as well. I really can't speak to the people who were a part of the regional prisons board or not, but I mean, at least some people on that board were meeting at some point. I mean, there were, I don't know how many funds were raised, but funds were raised for that. And it was a functioning board at one point. I don't know about the roster or anything like that.
well, I think
so I do think it would be
it's not a
worthwhile.
roster.
I do think it would be worthwhile for this board to hear Mr. Lockwood. I guess in my experience with him, I found him to be a meticulous note taker. And I think it would be worth it for, at the very least, the mayor and maybe a couple of council members to sit down and hear his side of the story. But I guess the other thing that's challenging too, and I don't think you were referring to us in this sense, Ms. Lamborn, but I mean, during this process in 2009, we included our auditors. We went through everything. I mean, again, from our perspective, we have the Regional Prisons Museum bylaws that states that the assets go to the city of Lansing. And so when that board dissolved, right, wrong, or otherwise, we didn't force the Regional Prisons Board to dissolve. When they dissolved, we followed the bylaws to a T. So I wrestle with this insinuation that we're taking something when we didn't take anything from the Historical Society. The Regional Prisons Board dissolved, and we followed the bylaws. So I do want to clarify the wording there.
Well, but I have a problem with members of that governing body, because that's what they're called here, is a governing body, that the majority of them didn't know they were part of it. So how could they come up with bylaws? How could they be responsible for bylaws if they didn't even know they were on this governing body? There surely wasn't a vote taken that would have included them, because they would have had to have been there. And if they didn't even know they were on the board, how can you even take the bylaws as something that's important?
If
I mean,
Mr.
they were
Lockwood could
violating.
produce minutes from the Regional Prisons Museum, I mean, would that satisfy you guys if we
Well,
could find
yes,
it?
you can. Yes, that would be great.
Okay.
Because I would especially like to see who was attending.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because
I'm
I
sure
think
we could
that's
ask
the real
them. I mean,
issue. But
Yeah,
am I the only one that thinks that, when you start a 501c3 and you're filing this paperwork with the Secretary of State and you put 5 people's name on a governing board that had no idea they were going to be on it, from the get-go, it was wrong.
If that's true.
No,
that
it's
is-
not. I mean, that's not a matter of debate. Yeah, that's
Yeah, well,
not
it's
a matter of
wait a minute,
debate.
but
Yeah.
if someone called, say, I'm just going to throw a name, Riley out there.
Right.
okay, And he was on the phone with them and they said, hey, can you be on this board? And then he's busy, he's on, talking to other people. And he said, oh, sure, I can be on that board. Click.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
totally forgot that he
Right.
accepted that part.
Well,
You know,
no.
was
I don't know
14
why
years
that conversation didn't happen.
No, I'm not saying it either, but I can also tell you that Kenny Wilk, who was a district representative for the state of Kansas at the time, specifically told me that that was wrong for them to have used his name in any type of promotion for a Kansas Regional Prison Museum. And he said that attempt to use his name constituted fraud. It's called fraud, you know? I'm just telling you what the man said. And I'll tell you what else he said. If you all had any smarts, you'd go ahead and take care of this because you sure don't want all this coming out. Because the city of Lansing is tied to these documents
That sounds like a
over and over.
threat.
Oh, it's not. It's
That's
not.
what it sounded like to me.
Well, I'm sorry. He's the one that said it. I didn't. I just repeated
Yeah,
what
well,
he said.
I mean, so cordially,
Yes.
we have said that we would like
Yeah.
to see the documentation. We'll meet with everybody,
Mhm.
kind of come up with,
Yeah.
a potential solution.
Okay.
Okay, so I mean, that's the direction I think the governing body wants to go, correct?
And as
Yeah.
Mr. Van said, as Tim said, we followed the letter of the law.
Yeah, I mean, I
That's
don't
correct.
think,
That's correct. I agree.
I don't
Yes.
think there's any
Mhm.
blame there. Okay,
Okay.
anything else? I
No.
appreciate you
Oh,
coming.
well, thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate allowing us to, the rest of the board is here as well, and a few other concerned citizens that were here. So want to thank you for taking the time to see us.
Well, thanks for coming.
Do you mind if we remove our,
No, I mean, if you want to leave,
Well, could we,
I like it.
Mayor, could we get at least a approximation of when documents will be produced so we can look at them? I mean, if we're just going to walk away after a lot of these accusations have been made, shouldn't we at least get a somewhat of
Well, I
a
think we'll work,
deadline?
Tim can work and figure out what a good timing is for any kind of
Mhm.
What
get
did Tim-
together?
What did Tim just say? He said something, didn't he?
All right,
No,
she can drop off the documents whenever. Again, I'm aware of the bylaws. We included them in the minutes, but some of the things that she's referencing, we've never seen before. We're not aware of. I don't know about them. But again, I'm really good reviewing this stuff. I think Beth would review it with me, and maybe we can even talk to some accountants as well. I do think it would be worthwhile for the mayor and a couple of people to speak with Mr. Lockwood, since his name was dropped quite a bit, and hear his perspective on this.
Yeah, I mean,
The other stuff-
from my perspective, I would go back and get whatever documentation that builds your case,
Mhm.
right?
Okay.
So then when we do meet, you can lay that out and say,
Okay.
hey, here's what we have.
I'd like to hear from our former city administrator, Mike Smith. I think that would be
Yes.
a
We-
good person to talk to also.
We would have liked to have had him here as well.
Do you think, Mayor, that we need to get, Jerry Riley and all the others that was accused? Do we need to interview?
No, I mean, they were
They
either
don't
on the
want to be
board or
involved.
off the board. That's like bygone to me. All right. There were signed bylaws. That was a legal document. All right. What we're trying to figure out is whose money went where and is any of that money belonging to you?
Thank
If you can show that to the council and the governing body, then I would think we'd be favorable on doing something.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mayor, if we could get with Mr. Lockwood,
Yeah, we
since he
will.
was the treasurer,
We will.
he should be able to get into the bank records because he was on it and
Yeah,
get some of the records for it.
Tim's going to set that.
That would be
Yeah.
awesome. That would be great.
Every time I've called Mr. Lockwood, I mean, he calls me back right away. He's always provided the information I've asked for. So again, I think we could set something up with him pretty quick.
That would be great. Will you just let us know?
Okay.
Okay.
Well, thank you.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thanks, Deborah.
Okay, item number 6 is the Lansing Library Board appointment. We received an application by Sharon Mueller for a reappointment to the Lansing Community Library Board for another 4-year term ending on 30 April 2026. I need a motion to approve the Lansing Community Advisory Board reappointments of Sharon Mueller for a term ending on 30 April 2026.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Call the roll.
Mr. Major,
Yes.
Mr. Garvey.
Yes.
Mr. Bueller.
Yes.
Mr. Clemens.
Yes.
Mr. Brungard.
Yes.
Mr. Stednica.
Yes.
Mr. Trinkle.
Yes.
Mr. Kirby.
Yes.
Motion passed. Item number 7 is Lansing Tree Board appointments. There was a vacancy for a tree board and 2 applicants were submitted. Ms. Barb Eckmeyer, an existing board member, decided to resign from the board to allow the 2 new applicants to serve. The tree board recommends the appointment of Bethany Mchugh for a term ending December 31st, 2022, and Kathleen Gledhill for a term ending December 31st, 2024.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Call the roll.
Mr. Major,
Yes.
Mr. Garvey.
Yes.
Mr. Bueller.
Yes.
Mr. Clemens.
Yes.
Mr. Brungard.
Yes.
Mr. Stednica.
Yes.
Mr. Trinkle.
Yes.
Mr. Kirby.
Yes.
Motion passed. Item number 8 is Parks and Rec Advisory Board appointment. An application was submitted by Noreen Lahan. Sorry about that. For the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board since their last meeting. The Parks and Recreation Board Advisory Board recommends the appointment of Noreen Lahan for a term ending December 31st, 2022.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Yeah. Did we have other applications too? Was there a deadline on the?
No,
applicants?
these were actually, these have been positions that you've probably seen on Tim's memo that have been open for a long time. However, with the Parks and Rec Board, just to give you an example, they're 2-year terms.
Mhm.
So every year in October, we advertise for the positions that will be potentially becoming vacant December 31st. So in other words, once that happens, it's kind of on the street until it gets filled. So we just happen to have several. We hadn't had any meetings this year, missed one for weather, one for quorum. And so in that meantime, we had received the applications that we received. So
Okay. I thought there was another applicant because I reviewed an application a month ago from a friend that was applying that I got in touch with Tim on that would like to serve on any board. So that's the reason why I'm asking.
You know if he applied for this one?
I thought he had. I know he was submitting, but if it didn't, then
Yeah.
I didn't receive.
that's the reason why I'm like, if he missed a suspense, that's great. I'm not saying no to this one. I'm just saying, was there any others?
Yeah.
Is there any empty seats? Okay.
None that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Did you send that to me, Marcus, or did
No,
You know,
he was
you're-
applying. I reviewed.
I remember
his
you had
application
mentioned you
like
knew
he asked
someone
me
who was
to, and
interested, but I mean, did he send the application to me or to Tish or our previous clerk, or do you remember where he sent it?
That's the question is, I'm not sure he submitted it. I know I reviewed it, gave him input, feedback, and then gave it back to him. And I thought he had submitted it. That's why I'm like, I hope we have other applicants too, you know?
Yeah.
The more the better, you know, I like that. The more volunteers, the better. Okay. All right, thanks.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Call the roll.
Mr. Major,
Yes.
Mr. Garvey.
Yes.
Mr. Bueller.
Yes.
Mr. Clemens.
Yes.
Mr. Brungard.
Yes.
Mr. Stednica.
Yes.
Mr. Trinkle.
Yes.
Mr. Kirby.
Yes.
Motion passed. Item number 9 is the South Activity Center gym door bid. The south doors at the Activity Center gym date back to 1950s and are made of wood and are showing significant deterioration. There are 3 sets of doors which will be replaced with 2 sets of doors, and a third will be replaced with panels with windows. Bids were opened on 14 April, and the city received 1 bid from Overhead Door Company of KC for $53,111. Need a motion to approve the bid of $53,111 from Overhead Door Company of KC for the replacement of the south gym doors and authorizing the necessary signatures.
So moved. Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion on this one?
Is that just the outside doors or the inside doors included in that?
Let's see, outside.
Exterior doors only.
Exterior
Yeah.
doors only?
Mhm.
Ones that are falling apart.
Yeah, I went up there and took a look at them. Sorry, we don't have pictures. But are you still having removable center section? We move stuff in and out?
Yes.
Okay. Are you going to have the interior, two doors? So give everyone a visual. There's three doors that go into it. That's the snack bar. Then you got two wooden doors on the interior, and they have post and middle too. Are they removable?
They will not be at this point in time. It's something that we can do in the future. The reason that you're talking about the center mullions is what they are. And basically the cost difference between removable and non-removable was negligible. But there was a cost difference that if you made one with this removable mullion and one with a frame, plus it's kind of a little bit hard to explain, but basically think of this as in three sections. There's two support posts in between the three doors that exist now. Those support posts have to stay. The other segments that will be replaced will be fabricated kind of in a modular fashion. And by keeping them, you'll keep the look the same on both of them, and essentially they'll be replicating two identical sections as opposed to three different sections across there, if that makes any sense. The way I
Absolutely.
explained it. Okay.
Now, the bids, it was under what was budgeted last year,
That's
correct?
correct. We requested $60,000.
Okay, so it is under budget?
That's correct.
All my questions.
Yeah, normally if it is over budget, we mention that in the thing, if it meets the line item. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Call the roll.
Mr. Major,
Yes.
Mr. Garvey,
Yes.
Mr. Bueller.
Yes.
Mr. Clemens,
Yes.
Mr. Brungart,
Yes.
Mr. Stednica,
Yes.
Mr. Trinkle,
Yes.
Mr. Kirby.
Yes.
We got our money's
Motion
worth
passed.
out of them drawers, didn't we?
Thank you.
Item number 10 is the 2022 Pavement Preservation Program Mill and Overlay bids. The bids for the 2022 Mill and Overlay project were open on Wednesday, April 13, 2022 at 1:30 p.m. There were 5 alternates that were bid on, and staff recommends accepting alternates 1 in addition to the base bid. We need a motion to accept the bids and unit prices as presented and awarded the low bid to Little Joe's Asphalt Inc. for the base bid and alternate 1 in the amount of $789,344.45 with any budget overrun to be paid out for the capital reserve amount and authorize the necessary signatures.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion on this one for Mike?
We will have, if there's any left over, we'll use it on extra if we have it, like we do every year.
Yeah, we will follow our typical yearly guidelines.
If everything, if we have a street or something that, Have everything been working okay with Little Joe's? I mean, we haven't had any problems with them.
The 3 years that I've worked with Little Joe's, they've been very cordial and professional to work with. We've not had any.
I make a motion, yes, first, yes.
My only question is, in the newbie, what does alternate 1, alternate 3 mean?
So the different alternates it gives us the opportunity to try to maximize our line item because, again, we had a 30% increase in asphalt costs. So we really weren't sure what prices were going to do to us. So for instance, last year we accepted all alternates because it was within our budget. This year, asphalt prices being what they were, we're not accepting all the alternates. So we're just doing alternate 1, which takes us to $789, $344.45. So it essentially uses the line items that are there. And then the other alternates were, just some other things that we would have done if we'd had the funds available.
Typically, we bid like for alternates just in case the base bid is low and we can cover several other things also. So they'll bid on them all, and then we can pick like, hey, we can go up to the 2 alternates within our funding.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you.
Sure. Have a motion and a second? Call the roll.
Mr. Major,
Yes.
Mr. Garvey,
Yes.
Mr. Bueller.
Yes.
Mr. Clemens,
Yes.
Mr. Brungard,
Yes.
Mr. Stednica,
Yes.
Mr. Trinkle,
Yes.
Mr. Kirby.
Yes.
Okay, item number 11 is executive session for economic development activities. I need a motion to enter into executive session to review economic development activities pursuant to the discussion of confidential data relating to the financial affairs or trade secrets of corporations, partnerships, trusts, and individual proprietorships pursuant to KSA 75-4319 Bravo 4 for a period of 30 minutes. Starting at 7:55 and ending at 8:25.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Call roll.
Mr. Major,
Yes.
Mr. Garvey.
Yes.
Mr. Bueller.
Yes.
Mr. Clemens,
Yes.
Mr. Brungard,
Yes.
Mr. Stednica,
Yes.
Mr. Trinkle,
Yes.
Mr. Kirby.
Yes. Bye,
Okay,
sir. You gotta go.
So we'll have to have need a motion to return. You said recording in process.
I move that we return to open session.
I have a motion and a second to return to open session. Call roll.
Mr. Major,
Yes.
Mr. Garvey.
Yes.
Sorry,
We had 10 seconds.
that was your
left.
timer. Mr. Bueller.
Yes.
Mr. Clemens,
Yes.
Mr. Brungard,
Yes.
Mr. Stednica,
Yes.
Mr. Trinkle,
Yes.
Mr. Kirby.
Yes.
Motion passed. Item number 12, executive session for land acquisition. Actually, I need a motion to enter an executive session for preliminary discussions of the acquisition of real property pursuant to KSA 75-4319 Bravo 6 for a period of 5 minutes to return to open meeting at 8:32.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Call roll.
Mr. Major,
Yes.
Mr. Garvey.
Yes.
Mr. Bueller.
Yes.
Mr. Clemens,
Yes.
Mr. Brungard,
Yes.
Mr. Stednica,
Yes.
Mr. Trinkle,
Yes.
Mr. Kirby.
Yes.
Gene, are you making? Make a motion, we return to open session?
I have a motion and a second. Call roll.
Mr. Major,
Yes.
Mr. Garvey.
Yes.
Mr. Bueller.
Yes.
Mr. Clemens,
Yes.
Mr. Brungard,
Yes.
Mr. Stednica,
Yes.
Mr. Trinkle,
Yes.
Mr. Kirby.
Yes.
Motion passed.
I'd like to make a motion to authorize the mayor to enter into negotiations for the acquisition of real estate property.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? Call roll.
Mr. Major,
Yes.
Mr. Garvey.
Yes.
Mr. Bueller.
Yes.
Mr. Clemens,
Yes.
Mr. Brungard,
Yes.
Mr. Stednica,
Yes.
Mr. Trinkle,
Yes.
Mr. Kirby.
Yes.
City attorney.
Nothing to report, man.
Tim, you got anything additional?
No.
Okay. We'll go around the horn. Marcus.
Thanks to our volunteers tonight, and thanks for all the hard work that the staff did for this long session tonight. We got a lot accomplished. Thank you.
Jesse.
Yeah, ditto, thanks to the volunteers. I appreciate all that you do for the city. That's all I've got.
All right, Greg. Thanks.
Once again, thanks for volunteers and thanks to Mr. Easton for coming in and bringing our attention to what could need to be fixed. The UDO. And on this day in 1753,
We don't have time for that.
Rome was founded.
Dan.
On this day in 1753, Romulus founded Rome.
Very nice. Dan, please.
Aren't you glad to
Well, we
find
did-
that out?
If you haven't heard, we did get response on our base grant for the sewer going out to McIntyre. Nobody in Leavenworth County was approved the grant. All the grant money that was available went to primarily 3 locations. Baser is asking the state for some explanations. And I personally think that we need to ask as well, just to find out why it was disapproved. I thought it was a strong packet that we put in. We had backing and approvals up and down the line. I don't know why it wasn't considered unless they based it on some criteria that we're not aware of. I don't know.
Right. Now we're going to talk to the county and see if we can get some kind of explanation.
That, and then echo what the others said on the volunteers. We really depend on them, and I appreciate them stepping forward. That's everything, Mayor.
All right, thanks, Dan. Carrie?
I have nothing, Mayor.
All right, thanks, Carrie. Don?
I don't have anything, Mayor.
Okay, Mr. Dave?
I don't have anything, Mayor.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Gene?
Only thing I got is, whatever you can do to contribute to help out the brave people of Ukraine and donations to worthy causes or whatever. They're fighting a battle for the world. And they're pretty much doing it alone. And with that, I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adjourn. Call roll.
Mr. Major,
Yes.
Mr. Garvey,
Yes.
Mr. Bueller.
Yes.
Mr. Clemens,
Yes.
Mr. Brungard,
Yes.
Mr. Stednica,
Yes.
Mr. Trinkle,
Yeah.
Mr. Kirby.
Yes.
We are adjourned.